Hi there, I'm David Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild, and today on the Art of the Master I'm going to try something a little bit different. So what I did is a friend of mine came from out of town, his name is Kyle, and while we were just hanging out talking, we were talking about role-playing and Dungeon Master stuff. So I thought, well hang on, let me mic us up and just record us talking. And right about then, our good friend, our mutual good friend, and also my employee Ulysses showed up. So we mic'd him up too, and we decided we'd just sit around for about an hour and just talk about Dungeon Master stuff and just kind of see where the conversation went. So hopefully you enjoy it. It's something that I kind of want to perfect and refine. It's something that I've been thinking about doing for a while, and we just had a random chance just to try it. So here it is, the first ever Dungeon Master Jam session. I hope you enjoy.
I guess we can ask you is what do you think DMing wise the best amount is?
Yeah.
I don't like more than 5.
Okay.
5 is like my spot. I think 4 is too little because I feel like people can get bored because they're just like. I feel like if you divide 4, it's even, but it's not a good thing.
Is that 5 including yourself?
No, 5 players,
Okay.
like excluding me. So like 5 people playing, where I can just like say like 3 of you go this way and then the other 2, and then that way I can think like of the 2 routes I have, which is the hardest route, and I'll send the 2 that way, and then the 3 will get like the easier route, and then that way it's like it's a weird kind of that's just what I like to do, because then like the 2 people will be like, man, that was really tough, and then the people are like, oh well, we didn't, and then in real life they get to talking, and then they're like, maybe next time we don't split up, and I like basically I don't want to go over 5 because then I feel like it's just a lot and I won't get to everything.
Okay.
But then
That's
like,
kind of what I'm thinking too.
yeah,
And it almost sounds like when you say 5, it kind of made me think too that maybe, like if there's a disagreement amongst the group, you'll always have like 2 people think of one thing and 2 people think about doing another thing. You got that odd man to who's gonna take one side or the
I
other.
didn't even think of that, but yeah.
You know.
I want to get into something you kind of said where you were like, you when you split a party, do you actually split them up in a room? Because you said they come back and they talk about it.
Well, I'll always like advise. I'll be like, I'll put 2 problems and I'll make them kind of sound equally like important, and then naturally hope that they would go, well, I want to do this, because I try to like, especially if it's not a one shot, I try and make the players say like invested in like a character or an NPC, and then like have that person have an issue, and then have like the main issue, and then they'll naturally just be like, well, I don't care about that one, I'm gonna go here, and then once they start to like make allegiances, then I decide which one I'm sending where, and then they're like, oh, we thought we were going this way, like, for example, or whatever. And then eventually I'll have the option that they can all come back to the common area and just be like, well, what happened? Especially if it's a campaign. That's how we'll end the session, is like they'll go back home, or they'll bring all the loot back and they'll do their thing, and then they're like, well, we did this. Because I just got lucky enough that I've only played with people that love RPing and like getting into it. Like,
So you're not afraid for the party to split up, because a lot of DMs are like, I mean that's like the golden rule, you don't split the party. And first of all, because it's more work on the DM, but see me, I mean I see that as a general warning to players. I mean you don't want to split the party because you guys are not as powerful together, but honestly, it's a game, it's open-ended, this is how I'm running my game. You guys, if you all want to check out another room, don't worry about how much work it is for me, because I can do it. You know, and of course some people just not really comfortable with that, but I don't want the players to feel like, well, if they go off down a tunnel by themselves, they're just gonna die because there's just too many bad guys down there. And I do, admittedly, behind the scenes, I do try to compensate a little bit, so it's still challenging for him, but it's still going to be really dangerous. He's not going to be able to complete the whole dungeon by himself when he splits off. It's just not going to happen.
right.
I caution them against it, and sometimes I do have players die, and but I just, I'm not too worried about it. Now, it can be cumbersome if every session everybody wants to split up, then that becomes annoying.
I guess for me though, like, it's funny hearing you say that. Like, I don't want my players to separate, but like I was sitting in a game when I was first learning just how to play tabletop games, and the DM got really flustered and really like it threw a jam in them whenever they split up, and I was one of the players that was undecided. Like, I was like, whatever, I'll go with whoever. But 2 people were so like, no, this is what we have to do, and the other guy's like, no, dude, that doesn't matter. And then they started like recruiting amongst the players, and I just looked at the DM and he was just like, oh man, I didn't account for this at all. And then he had to basically pick which one he was gonna ad lib and which one he would devote to his notes. And I was like, yeah, see, I don't want to be caught there. So for me, I always go in expecting them to do something like ridiculous, like splitting up or something like that. But I didn't know it was a cardinal rule. So.
Which means you always have something in the back of your mind. You know it's a possibility. So whether or not you know it, whether or not, because obviously right now I couldn't even begin to tell you what I would do at the drop of a hat. My party members split off because it depends on what's been going on, what's happening. But in the back of my mind, somehow there's something running, some kind of program in the back of my head. So if someone does split off, I'm like, okay, I got this. No big deal. You know.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll bleed things in too.
I do my food and the game, right? And
Mhm.
so when we cook before we do food and all, and then we leave everything up in usually about an hour session. Wow. Long session.
God, I love
So
that.
when my party splits up, I'm like, okay, whoever's splitting up, let's go get your second round of food.
Oh, that's
We're gonna do
actually
that.
perfect. You know.
We're gonna go do this, and then like I'll be like, okay, go back up and bring down your food. You know, if I split up, I don't want to spend 30 minutes with that split up each side, even though
Oh,
it
yeah.
might last that long. I'll do like 3 to 4 rounds, and then I'll be like, okay, let's get the other group gathered here so they can get engaged.
Oh, yes.
You guys go get food now. You know, go fresh food
Mhm.
with them. And then I just keep alternating back like that, and I try to get them back together without knowing they're coming back together.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's up to like your DM like a flusher. It's he put in all the situations to be flushed.
Uh huh. And that's why I
Players
was like,
can't
wow. Yep.
know they can go down a side street if there isn't one told to them. So
Yes.
you as a DM kind of introduce these things. So I'll give them options, and I'll know what the options entail.
Right. And that's the key, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I always think the splitting up thing. I always think about that one session that we did. I think it was when we crossed over the two groups.
Oh, I
at
remember that.
At that
Yeah,
one
yeah.
house, and basically what Dave did, he had us a common goal, but it was like we each arrived there at our own way, and a group of us was stuck doing something that wasn't accomplished in our private respective sessions, and then he was like, all right, and he physically had us like sit in a certain spot in the table, so he would get up and like almost sit in the middle and direct his attention at this group, and then he would look at this group, and it was almost like doing a workshop in school. So like though, and as they spoke amongst themselves, we were still able to hear each other talking, but we were all in the same place. It just worked.
It worked out really well, although the big thing about that, and that was supposed to be a continual thing, split, come back together, split, come back together for something big, although it didn't work because my other group, a lot of those guys moved away suddenly, because of PCS, I think it was. But anyways, I remember that I had to hammer fix it, because I had, with your group, I had to have, what was it, Isla Amarelia, some goddess I made up. I had to hammer fix the fact that once I'd started and I'd announced this, that I'd be doing this and everybody's excited, I got their group running, I got your group running, suddenly I realized, time-wise, you guys are like 6 months behind the other people in time, because the way I set it up and the way I just, sometimes I think and I plan and I don't think ahead. So I literally had to pull you guys through time arbitrarily, and then later that was another story point that she got in trouble with the other gods for messing with time and all that. So that was kind of another thing that I just kind of went with, and it caused me a little bit of headache, but nobody seemed the worse for wear over it other than me. And I was just like, oh, I can't believe I did that. It was, you know.
Was that all in like the same campaign?
Yeah, because they had their own campaign, and the other group had their own game that campaign that I was running, and it was all within the same one. And then in order to get those guys in time in my game correctly, because I mean it was literally a different time of year. It wasn't just like a week. A week, it doesn't matter. Just you just kind of ignored it. It's fine. Travel time, whatever. But totally forgot what I was gonna say.
Well, it was.
But
It was
yeah,
like
yeah.
I think it was.
fix it.
It was like a
bad.
minor NPC that they encountered, and then we were all like, "Who?" And then it kind of dawned on David, and he was like, "Oh, you guys didn't meet so and so yet," and that was just like what bridged us together. And then he just on the spot retconned it. And to me, like even today, thinking about it, it didn't seem like a hiccup or anything, and neither for Ashley or anyone else. I think it's because in real life, we just had a lot of schedule problems, and we couldn't get together as often as like the other group, I guess, or we skipped a session or two, and then it kind of just didn't catch up because physically we weren't playing.
And every time I talk to players, because obviously you were in that game, players never really notice the stuff that you do. Like when I go, oh man, that whole session was screwed up, like the whole time thing. It was a big deal for me, but
you guys are just like, oh, okay, you know,
Yeah.
So
because everybody just wants to play and have fun.
you played a one shot.
Oh yeah.
You might have recognized, maybe in the beginning when I was explaining it, how I was explaining the Indolent
Mhm.
and how things have already happened now, right?
Yeah.
Every game I ever play with anybody is actually played in the world that I've played, and will have consequences to the other party.
Ah,
So,
dude, that's
so
a-
Phantom's already been gone through, and that dwarf I talked about was from a party that belonged to Phantom.
And you just keep adapting it the whole time.
Okay, with so there's a couple of instances where it affected the other party major. So the other party went into tombs of annihilation and started the death plague. It started the death plague for the other party
Oh,
in
that's
a
cool.
different game. I also did so I did the Giants one, and you have 3 towns you have to pick to save.
Mhm.
I made consequences for the 2 towns you didn't help.
Dude, I like that.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Okay, so one was a village with food. So if you didn't do that, all rations got doubled, and all food got doubled for the next year. One was a horsing village, so all horses got doubled,
Mhm.
and then all riding stuff got doubled for the next year for everybody's campaign. And then one was a fishing village, um, and that one actually didn't have anything with it,
Mhm.
but it would have effects to that village having like with dwarves and stuff, so it would affect that area when you went to it.
Okay.
So it kind of had this own ebb and flow, and they chose to go to the one that actually didn't do anything, so they had everything again.
Wow.
Nice, nice. I like it because, and it's nice because I like to hear that because I like to hear that more often from DMs that the world is not static. Your players, that you have consequences, and the world, even if they choose to do nothing, oh, nothing can possibly happen. Well, if you choose to do nothing, everything else is just going along, and then you just decide as DM, well, this kingdom fails this year because there weren't a band of brave adventurers to help solve why the crops were dying, and now it's fallen into ruin, and maybe the players aren't as welcome there because, well, they're just not, for whatever reason. Just consequences and things keep moving.
It helps me with TPKs, because if I do a total party kill, we're done with that campaign. It's the only way I'm going to end it. If you die, you have like 3 people die, whatever, they can bring in the party.
Okay.
In TPK, the scenario's over, and the big bad evil guy won.
Yeah.
Right? There's consequences to my world.
Okay.
So in Storm King's Thunder, then, I don't want to ruin it for you if you haven't played it, but that consequence. Tomb of Annihilation, the death plague went through.
Wow. Okay.
Actually, the death plague, they didn't kill him fast enough, so there's a death scar. So I kind of wanted to retcon the death in 5e because I didn't like how easy it is to be like, oh, you're back.
Mhm.
So there's a chance now that when you die, you can't be brought back to life. The first time it's super easy to pass. The more times you get brought back, the more scars that are on your body.
Okay.
So you can't continually come back.
Cause and effect, man.
Nice, nice. So, on average, how many times do you think it would be, or would a player be able to come back? Do you think?
I've been dabbling around with it. I wanted to do Constitution at first, but then I was like, well, Warriors are always going to come back.
Yeah.
Then how do I make a system to where? So I just made it a static roll, and each time you die, it increases by 2 with a DC 10.
It's just harder and harder every time. Well, that makes sense. I know in some systems they talk about coming back from death, and instead of being the typical fantasy, oh, and you're healed and you're back to life and you keep playing, there's more consequences. Like there's some kind of physical injury, something's wrong. There's the shock from dying, and suddenly you're pulled back in your body because in a fantasy world, there's always these other elements of going to another realm and stuff when you pass and you come back, and it really just tears at you, and then you could have things wrong with you like madness or phobias, stuff like that. I've seen other game systems address it like that, and that's always kind of interesting too.
Yeah. They have stuff like that, but it's like 2 pages. It's not fleshed out very well.
No, it needs to be a little more fleshed out. It's enough though to give you some ideas and to push forward with it. Because there's a lot of information in DMG.
I had modifiers to it too. Like so most people in the beginning will use what is it, Revivify or whatever, where like if you just die you can come back.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But if you take them and you don't have a cleric, and you take them back to their god's temple, so faith has something to do too. They get modifiers. So you can make it even easier.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, because it requires help. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to play into that, and I didn't want to play into something that had everybody, like a certain class benefit. Because then that makes people want to play that class.
Yeah, they go into it with like a preconceived. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But then you have to change it up a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
So, but I like that idea. That's pretty cool.
I've seen people do things with death, like something that you worked really hard to get, especially in a longer campaign. You have to forfeit it because you have to pay, like similar to like the Infinity Stone or whatever, a life for a life. You have to give something up in order to get your life back, and then it's something that the person either found that was worth a lot, or that they bought that was worth a lot, and you're like, well, now you don't have this anymore, but you get to play your same character, you know.
Okay, so I always have a story for everything. I'm sorry. So I had this thing where I was inspired by this magic card. It was called the Dark Sphere, and was it the Dark Sphere? Hang on, let me think for a second. No, it was something else. It wasn't Dark Sphere. That's a story for another day. So, anyways, my players had this object, right? And I gave it to them, and it was this object where they had it, and they could just kill their opponent. But it was like that. It was like equivalent exchange. And so what I did is you had this object, and you would wield this magic object. I don't remember the details. Let's say I was going to kill Kyle. I'm like, all right, Kyle, you die. Yep, he dies. No save, no nothing. He's just dead. But then what I did is I had to roll. First, I started with all players. I rolled to see if any of the players were affected. If they were affected, then I would roll for the players. And strangely enough, it didn't affect them. Then I would roll to see if any of the close NPCs they knew were affected. And if they weren't, then I would move on to, I would just randomly pick someone in the world, but the player would know. I would stop with the action, I would cut scene, I'd go to someplace else in the world and say, like, there's some people walking along the beach, a couple talking, then suddenly the guy's like, ah! Dies, and just dies horribly right there in front of his like wife or whatever, right there on the beach. And then cut back to the players, and let's keep going. And the player's like, what?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's how that works. Oh no. And then one time I rolled, players weren't affected, but then one of their NPCs were affected. One of their because in my games, I always try to make sure that the players always have NPCs not that aren't just neutral to them, but are sometimes really allies, and that they know that when the back's against the wall, these guys, even if a player is all by himself and falls unconscious, these NPCs will literally, I'll have them pull his fat out of the fryer and save his life because they're loyal. And then one of these loyal NPCs ended up dying horribly right in front of them because they were using this magic item that they're like, well, it's risky, but it's kind of worth it. But they were kind of questioning it because how bad it was. And of course, you got to dress it up. You can't just say, oh, some kobold and Cholt dies. They're like, whatever. But then you try to humanize a little bit more, connect it with them, especially, like a couple walking, something they can identify with. The guy dies, like, oh, Jesus, that was horrible. And then when one of these other NPCs they value dies, they're like, oh, man, I don't know if we can keep using this thing, because they just want to know and just get rid of that thing because it's horrible. And that's how those kind of items should be. And I like that idea.
Yeah, that you did something at one point too. I can't remember what it was, but we had to make a decision, and it was a very important decision for the entire party. And it landed on one person, the only person that had the insight that they moved for insight or whatever it was. And in real life, I forget who it was trying to figure it out, and we're all like, no, man, this is what you need to do. And the other half of the table was like, no. And then you got up and we were just like, you got 5 seconds, like that. And that for that dude, the entire room went quiet. I think we heard the fan just humming, and that's it. And then they were like, yeah, we'll do it.
Because,
like, okay.
And I understand if you're in a fantasy game, you're not really these characters, and or else you would just kind of know, you have more knowledge to work with.
Oh, yeah.
So I give people a lot of clout, probably more metagaming than they should. Let them work out these decisions, and sometimes they're like, I'll get up, use the restroom, I'll go grab myself a snack, I'll be right back. I give them 50, because players can spend 15, 20 minutes talking amongst themselves and being totally in game, which is buying me time to put myself together, write down notes and stuff. And then, but some things are just so important. I'm like, look, you guys have talked quite a bit. Okay, I'll put my hand up, like you said. 5, 4, I need a decision. 3, someone make a decision. 2, someone make a 4. 1, someone makes a decision. I love doing that.
I have an hourglass.
Okay.
I have an hourglass, and that's 2-minute, 3-minute timer, and I'll just flip it arbitrarily sometimes.
Ooh.
I do like the idea of the hourglass timer.
Now, do you guys do it behind or in front of the screen?
I do it. No, I do it. I have no screen.
Oh.
I never DM with a screen.
Really?
I feel like it disconnects me from the players, and I already know I need to do it, so it's not like I need something there to do it. I have an area down to my side to hide things, like my miniatures and stuff, but I like the interaction.
Dude, that's interesting. I've never done that before.
See, that's why I like the low GM screens they have now for 5e. I call them the half screen, because it used to be the bigger screens would always be like 8.5 by 11 standing up, and I hated that because I felt like I was disconnected, like you're saying. But I like the shorter screens that they got for 5e. I just like how they're made. It's 8.5 by 11 turned on its side, and I feel like I can see more of the table. Although I've been in the habit here lately of taking my screen, instead of being right in front of me, I'll slide it off to one side or the other, so only part of the screen is in front of me, so I can see more in front of me. And I'm not too worried about cutting off the guys on either side of me, because those guys are usually, because I'm sitting at the short end of the long table, and then a guy on either side of me, they're really close, so I don't feel disconnected because I see him from the chest up anyways. It's okay, but when I can't see the board in front of me, that drives me a little crazy, so I kind of move it. But if I'm doing a lot of theater of the mind stuff, then a lot of times I don't use a screen at all.
So a lot of people with screens, that DM, I feel like, do you guys fudge your rolls a lot? Like, what's the purpose of the DM screen?
Well, for me, it's not necessarily hiding stuff so much as it is, I mean, because if I want to shield my rolls, I'll shield my rolls. I'll find a way if I want to. And sometimes there's some fudging. Everybody does it. There's some fudging for whatever reason you have in that game. It's just, you know, there's just too many reasons why.
Never fudge my dice.
But
ever. I take it a point that my dice are what they roll. I even got bigger dice because my players are like, you can't roll that many times. I have really high rolls, and they're like, BS. So I got these dice that are about this big now. I'll just roll them out.
see, now if I roll a die right out in front of you, there's no fudging. It's just that's how it is. Now, I know everybody fudges die roll, well, except for you.
I don't either, actually.
You don't fudge roll? Oh man, well, I feel bad now.
Well, and it's not that I've never heard of anyone do it, because I've heard of other people do it, but like me, my 100% reasoning for a screen is to hide the miniatures that I want to surprise them with, and also because I was like, well, you're not a DM without a screen, but hearing someone not use it is really refreshing as I'm sitting here, to be honest.
See,
You want to hide miniatures? Go to Walmart and get those like $5 drawer things, and that's what I put mine in.
Oh.
You can't see it. It's like opaque. You can kind of see what's in there,
but you
no,
don't
it's
know what's
like,
coming.
You have no idea. You can have it all organized. I have it organized by encounter. So
Oh, wow.
I go like each time I'll have 6 rows, and I go this encounter, this encounter. The only thing you got to hide are the big ones.
Right.
You can have someone else in the room. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But that way I'm like, here's this one. Here's this one.
So for me, the purpose of the screen, getting back to that, is literally the information on it, because I do like the information on it. Plus, also now I've grown to where I use the folded sheets of index card with everybody's name written on it and crucial information like Ulysses and what your character's name is, and then pertinent stuff like your passive perception, maybe the 3 or 4 skills that you're proficient in, the languages you speak. So I have it right there at a glance, so I don't have to ask you. So it's right there, and then that way too on my screen, because they're so long, I'll line them up on one side of my screen. Typically I'll line them up more towards the right hand side of the screen, so as the guy who's top of the initiative, once I got them in order, then let's say you're top of the initiative, and then right after you're done, then I move you to the left hand side, and then I go to the next guy, move him to the left hand side, and then when I'm done, then I slide everybody back and I start again, kind of abacus style.
Yeah.
But I still feel bad that I fudged my rolls, but I don't do it to cheat or get one over on my players. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I do it for
Dramatic effect.
dramatic effect, exactly.
You
Or
don't like to kill your characters then, your players.
admittedly, even though I have player deaths, there's a lot of times where I just don't feel like it's a good time, and sometimes it is kind of harder for me to kill my players because I have kind of struggled with this over the years. killing off characters. Not that I've ever had people storm off or be mad or anything, because they understand the game, and sometimes guys just die. But it's almost like watching your favorite TV show, with the exception, let's say Game of Thrones, where they kill people off all the time. But you get attached to the same people, the same crew. You realize, at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of the show, and the end of the show, those same characters are still probably going to be there, with the exception of like once a season, maybe somebody really big dies off and that's it. But these characters are always reoccurring, and you get attached to them. Plus, also players get attached to their characters. And I know some guys who have just kind of punched out and not kept playing in that campaign because they don't want to. That one character is dead, so they're not going to play anymore. But they'll play in the next game that comes up. So I try to kind of ride that line just a little bit. So maybe I'm a little more softer. But for me, I'm just not as worried about character death as I am those characters having fun. Those players having fun with those characters throughout the story. Plus, also, your character dies. But there are fates worse than death. And sometimes I like to push that. So if a character dies, sometimes they're going to go to the underworld and get him back. Well, what does that player do while he's dead? Well, I figure it out. Sometimes it just depends on what it is. If somebody dies, I try real quick to try to still keep them in the game somehow, some way. Be it I slide them an NPC to keep playing until we can get him resurrected, or while the players are going to Underworld to find him, maybe since he's in the Underworld now, I got him doing some other stuff. Just unexpectedly doing weird stuff. I don't know what it is. Maybe he's just finds himself randomly in the world and he's fighting whatever's crawling around down there and trying to find his way back and just weird stuff like that. I don't know.
So you actively like to keep the character that they had with the character that you think.
I do. Admittedly, that's a problem with me. Is I'm not super big on character death, but I don't mind when it comes around, because then, especially in my games, because then when someone does drop and they start going on death saving throws, it's out of my hands. And one guy we were playing Rifts, and this wasn't even a roll. Everybody else had drifted out of this Horn slave ship, and they're deep underwater, and they'd rescued a bunch of slaves, and the other guy was like, no, I'm not going to rift out, I'm just going to hit the airlock and go out because I got this underwater special body armor, so he goes out, the airlock goes out. I'm like, cool. Oh crap! And then I just didn't even think about it. He did it, and I said, okay, good, and he goes, and then I didn't realize, I had to check my notes, they were way too deep. I'd already figured out how deep the ship was, because that's real important to me. If I'm introducing water, I need to know how deep they're going to be and all that, because I take account pressures and all that. He went out, and I was like, hang on. It's like, oh man, I think I messed up. I looked down, and I was like, oh yeah, you're way too deep, dude. He's like, oh, that's it? I'm like, yep. And he just got crushed by the pressures of the sea. And that was it. He was done. No save, no nothing. He just went out. I didn't think about it, or else I might have even gave him. I won't tell him he shouldn't do something. I won't tell a player they shouldn't do something. But had I been a little more mindful before he left, I would have said, you are pretty deep, but you don't know how deep you are. What do you want to do? Are you sure you want to leave? Give him just that one more final caution.
Put your foot into the water and it crushes,
Something like that. Yeah.
Subtle.
yeah. Just something subtle. But you can only do so much though before you just you got to let the player do it. I'm getting a little better though.
I have a saying. I don't kill my players' characters. I tell the story of their death.
Okay.
I like that.
That is cool.
So, and the reason I allow death to run, I wouldn't say rampant. If you do something dumb, you're probably going to die. And I also, in my games, I didn't like in D&D where it's like, it seems very linear. It's like, why didn't I ever run into the fire giant at level 1?
See, I do like introducing stuff that's way too high level for players, because I want to see what they do with it. Sometimes I'll put it in there just as an experiment, just because I want to see what they're really going to do. But also, too, that's an opportunity, because some players are like, well, let's throw down.
It introduces a new mechanic that they've never utilized before, or so most people use hide and sneak because I'm going to go burgle.
Mm-hmm.
Not to hide from the fire giant that's coming through, or this big bad, but it changes that encounter. That encounter is now not a and this is going to go back to what I was talking about. I got away from doing um, kill the guy, get XP,
Yeah.
and do gated because now they can go about it almost like a world without reward for doing whatever they have to do. The reward is going to be given to them when I give it to them. They can just play the game.
Right.
So like a fire giant incident, they go, oh shit, two. I'm gonna sneak away. I'm gonna hide. I'm gonna use this spell that I never, Okay, I got it.
It also gives them more of a chance to RP.
Yeah.
And sometimes with these big creatures, I'll force the RP. This big bad creature will show up, and suddenly, parlay. He wants to talk, and the player's like, "What?" It kind of catches them off guard.
Or it's like you amused him. He thinks it's funny.
There's an option. There's another option here. Why aren't we fighting this guy? And so I like that kind of stuff.
Well, the Tommy incident, I think of it all the time. And my cousin was playing in one of the games with Dave, and he was boasting about getting this Warhammer because he was this cleric, and this Warhammer was like the greatest thing ever. And he's like, it'll crush anything in front of me. And he tried to go toe to toe with death himself, or death itself, or whatever. And we were not allowed to intervene, otherwise everyone's fate would be changed. And like the fact that you had the death miniature actually helped too, because it's just very ambiance, the way the room was lit and everything. And he literally tried as hard as he could, and even after you told him, you're like, look, I assure you there's nothing you can roll on that 20 and it's not going to save you from this. And it just brought him back down, from like how he thought his character was larger than life. It was great.
Oh, we gotta take care of it.
We don't have any other rates on the cash registers.
So you play Theater of Mind a lot?
Well, I'm really new at the whole being not a player. I try to like learn from a whole bunch of different games, even though I've only played D&D really. I like Theater of the Mind. I got into I think I bought what are games? I bought a lot of White Wolf games because there was no miniatures. And I'm always listening when players come and they ask for certain games. I try to ask them and pick their brain on it. I like Theater of the Mind because of the cosplay element of it, like the ability of being like dress up as your character this weekend. But as far as
you guys dress up, you guys change your the way you talk and stuff.
oh yeah, like we'll have like players come over and they're just obsessed with the Creole dialect or whatever, and they'll start talking like that, and I think it just adds to it because like when they're not talking like that, then they're not in game. But it's not a necessity, but it's just great because then there are times where I find myself playing, I'm just like, I'm sorry, I was just like super engrossed in what you're doing, dude. Like, and I was like, okay, so this happens, and they're like, oh, okay, cool, because they just do such a great performance. And it also, like, especially before COVID, it also helps with changing locations. Like, we would go to like a park if it was, if it was an in-game session where we were all in like a forest somewhere. We'd go to like a park where we were around trees, and then we just get lost in it. But I've only really had experience with miniatures on a grid. The Theater of the Mind is something that it intrigued me forever, so I like I'm really big on it.
So, Erin
Love Theater of the Mind.
She'd play, she never got invested, and so she finally did a voice with one of the characters. It was almost like a joke like that, but I found her get really into that character.
Nice.
It was Becky, and she was a valley girl, but she was what was she? She was a valley girl sloth or something. It didn't make any sense. It was hilarious. She get really into it, and I really like that. And there's a couple because we have 4 normal people. It's me and another couple of one of my friends.
Oh.
And I'm trying to get them more engaged. And my new concept with Curse is Strong.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So what I'm going to do with the intro to Curse is Strong, have you read anything about?
Not very much.
So the very first one is the House of Dead. It's like this little starter to level 1. It's to get you to level 3. You're in this house. I'm going to mail out invitations. I am going to be strong. You're going to all come to my house, and I'm going to basically role play out the House of the Dead in my house.
Oh man.
And then they're going to all get sucked into the game as themselves. So,
Oh jeez.
Isn't that cool?
so that's
That's-
going to be
I like it.
Nice.
See, it makes me think of Call of Cthulhu because for me, if I run a Call of Cthulhu game, first of all, I almost handpick the people who are going to play, um, just because you kind of gotta be in the right mindset.
Oh yeah.
You can't be like almost like the typical D&D player. You gotta have a different mindset. You gotta really want to be in that Lovecraftian world, especially because it is pretty dangerous. And when I go Lovecraftian, it is a little more dangerous in my games for players. Brutal. So you typically usually I top out at about 3 players. You usually don't have much more than that. And then, oh my God, where was I going with that? I just lost my thought. Oh yeah. It's pseudo. It ends up being pseudo LARPing. Like we'll sit there and we'll play, but then they'll come over. But then you got more ambiance, even more than usual. And one time I had like a glow stick and I cracked it. And I'm walking around the room and people are following this mysterious light. And I must look silly as all get out. Stand in the room waving this glow stick, and then I'm going down the hallway, pretend like it's a cavern of players are following, and then literally we leave the dice, the paper, everything, the rule book, everything's in the other room, and we're like LARPing down the hallway now, and now we're talking, and people are like, what do we do for dice roll? I just got a rough idea, tell me what you want to do, I'll tell you whether or not it succeeds. And suddenly it's like, I'm just calling the shots, basically. They tell me what they want to do, and I tell them whether or not it passes or fails. And then by the end of one session, we were literally like, everything had caved in, we're literally all on top of each other, because we had this massive cave in. And then it was, that night was done, and then we all got up, and we're like, well, that's kind of a little different. That's kind of a little weird, because we're all like picking ourselves up off the floor. We went from transition from tabletop to LARP and back again. But I get that whole idea what you're saying. That was really kind of more longer than it needed to be. But I think that's kind of really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Add that little personal extra touch.
Yeah, just having different voices, I feel it's almost needed if you're gonna,
Oh yeah.
because without it, it just changes. Oh, the one thing that I just saw that was like when I first started doing new voices, it was towards the end of
Mhm.
Storm King's Thunder, and there's a part in it where they're all on a gambling ship, and I was like, I have to RP this, and we didn't really RP all that much. I was like, oh, how is this gonna go? So I got really into it. I did like different voices for everybody, and they like had fun with it. And I found like the voices that people liked were the voices that I couldn't do at all. Like the ones that I was trying to do an accent, and they would just blend into something completely different. But the one thing that struck me was there's this part where the captain or whatever is about to spill his guts, and the Kraken basically mind controls him. And I changed my voice in the middle of his sentence to this deep, dark thing, and their eyes just lit up. It was at that moment I realized I have to do different voices every time, because if I was to do my normal voice with it, that transition would never happen.
It's just not quite the same.
It wouldn't even come out. So ever since then, I've made the change, and it's a weird, awkward thing to do with a group if they've never done it before. But the moment you do it,
See,
it makes it so much better.
I don't mind if the players don't do it because well, especially now, it's just something it's a skill you acquire as a dungeon master. A lot of times I know when players are just talking smack, and then when they're actually in character. Although it does help if you can get them to speak in character or speak only if they're holding a certain object, which is a good technique to use sometimes. But I definitely like, for that reason, using my own voices. And it doesn't take much. It has to be different than the last one.
Which is why I'm having them play themselves in the next one,
Mm-hmm.
because I want them. They always go, oh, what should my character do? But then they don't think of me. So this I'm starting them off easy with what should I do, and then I'm gonna build on that.
That's pretty cool. I like stuff like that.
I think that'll get them a bit more invested.
I think that's a really clever idea you're going to use, Strahd. That's pretty cool. I can see the invitations
Well,
going
I
on
have
right
that
there.
table. I have one of those tables that plays. So when all the interactions with Strahd when they come to his castle for a couple of times, we're gonna do the meal thing that we had, but I'm gonna do it on the table when I'm gonna be Strahd.
That's so cool, man. Jealous.
Dude.
Oh, speaking of which, okay, so my buddy started doing Icewind Dale, and of course, I just happened at this point in time I had to drop out because I've been going to my folks a lot because my dad's not doing quite as well. But anyways, he said, "Oh yeah, man, for Icewind Dale, when I start, I got these blue Christmas lights, and I'm gonna get these icicle lights, and he brought a fog machine from me, so when they play, they got just some fog just kind of come out at the beginning of the game. I'm like, how is it the one game that I'm not there for, that all the special effects suddenly come out, and I've been bugging him to run a game for years?
Fog machines are awesome.
Oh yeah, they are.
So I couldn't get like a fog machine, so I got just the bare bones to what those little things like girls have them for like the oil to put water and they'll make like the little.
Oh yeah, the
soap.
little misters and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Well, I bought like a pack of like 4 or 5 of them, and like just like what's inside of it,
Mhm.
they're like super cheap. You can get them for like $7, and I put them all in this big container, and I made clouds instead of fog, and that stuff will just sit, and it looks like real fog. Because fog is too thick.
Right.
But the one thing, I'm glad I have Dwarf reports. The one thing, because they were in a cave.
Mhm.
I got a story I got to tell about that cave.
Okay.
The funniest interaction that I've ever made, and then party members came to this conclusion with. So it made the cave walls wet too. It was so cool.
Oh, that's neat.
And I made it. I built this whole contraption underneath, and I made it so there was this area, and they were opposed, and there was a swirling vortex cloud. I went all out.
Dude.
By the way, that's my 3rd session with those guys that I found on. Because I made it. I didn't have any of my scenery yet. I
No
only
wonder
had,
they come all the time. Holy crap!
well, I have one guy that drives an hour and another guy that drives
4 hours. 4 hours.
Good lord.
Man, you got
So-
me beat. I've only ever had anybody drive like
So
an hour.
here's what I did. So I made a whole nother section to the start of Storm King's Thunder. I kind of like ad-libbed the first section with these goblins, and I kind of made this huge interaction with like they had the choice to go with the elves, the goblins, or whatever. They chose to go and get the people through the goblins. Well, I wanted the goblins to be like this. Like whatever side you went to, it was this whole faction thing, and everybody was going to come together in the end and make like this unified council.
Mhm.
So I wanted the goblins to be good guys, but at the start not be good guys. So what I did is I made them all cursed by this evil crone bugbear. But they didn't know this, but they found it out through the whole thing. So they find out, they get into this thing, and they find out all these goblins are like they're hungry, but they can only eat living things. So they find this point out.
Hmm.
I have an ogre in there that gets stuck. Okay? It got stuck in the middle of this archway in the beginning of the thing. And it's been trying to get out for like the last 5 minutes of the cave. And they know this. So they went around a different way. Literally the next room they find after, like there was this other room that they could go through that they knew was trapped. And they got through that room and they turn the corner and they see about 20 goblins, like little goblins, big goblins.
Mhm.
It's like where they're living, breathing, and stuff. And they immediately say in Goblin, food. And they look at this thing that looks like Winnie the Pooh Bear stuck in the wall. And the goblins just go and devour this ogre. And I was like, I made this thing that just happened. It was the most amazing thing. And they killed this ogre that was going to kill him. And they used it against them. And they turned the goblins to help them because they fed the goblins.
Wow.
So now they're full for a little bit, so they're quelled. I was like, I didn't even think of this. This whole thing just happened. And they started an uprising against the crone because they started talking to him about like the reason why they have this curse is because I was like, there's no food down there. How are they gonna feed them to get this curse away?
Yeah.
I was like,
Oh man.
Man, that's cool, man.
and that's where Todd came in. I have this NPC that they took from the beginning of Storm King's Thunder and got him all the way through it to the end. This goblin named Todd. And then now he owns a store in Waterdeep. And you could go in any of my campaigns and you could go there. He sells water. They made an item called water skin pouches that you have 3 of them, it costs like 50 gold, and you can switch between different potions, and instead of taking an action to use a potion, it's a bonus action to use a potion. So I like that mechanic because I didn't like how potions take an action. So I feel like it's a waste of turn, especially I'm in combat, right? I'm fighting you. I have to drink a potion as an action, and now you hit me.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Like, what did I take the potion for? All I did was quell an action for do, I didn't get to do anything. To me, I think they should be bonus actions, but there needs to be a limiting factor. And like 50 gold for this is the limiting factor. You can't get in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You can't afford the potions till about 3rd or 4th level, where that starts to become a needed thing.
Right.
Okay.
So it's in the game. Anybody can buy them. You can put 3 potions of like quantities into this thing, and then you can use almost like a water skin, you know, you have on your back.
That's
Like
actually
as a
kind of
bonus
cool.
action.
Okay, I
That's
dig
awesome.
that. That's pretty
And
cool.
I like that the NPCs running the place to buy these.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
He actually became part of that council that I was talking about, where you got to choose the factions, and they all come together and they're like, oh, we're sorry, we abducted you because we had this food curse.
Yeah.
So there was a council that they elected, and he's on the council.
That's awesome.
Even better. Man, I love that kind of stuff, man. Oh, that's too good.
And my cleric, oh yeah, that's right. My cleric was trying to teach him the ways of his god, and he rolled a natural 20 back to back on it. So I had his own deity come down and bless him as a cleric. So the goblin became like a level 1 cleric, like part way through.
Jeez,
Crazy.
man.
It was just
Mega
this funny
NPC.
thing.
That's awesome, man. Oh my gosh, I love
Now I
that
want
kind
to
of
play.
stuff. I know. I just want to break out the dice and start rolling. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we'll do the. I'll bring a, next time I come down. We'll do another one shot, and I'm playing. I did with him the one shot out of the essentials kit.
Oh, okay.
It's like a ton of one shots, but I'm gonna basically do those as
I hope you enjoyed watching the first ever Dungeon Master Jam session. We really had a good time doing it, and basically we just had a good time just talking about role-playing and running role-playing games. And it's something that I hope we can do in the future, and I hope I can refine it a little bit. I got some ideas, some directions I want to go, and plus I have a large pool of people who do run role-playing games in this area, and hopefully we can get in and get them talking. And even though it's nice for me to make videos and just tell you stuff that I think might be important to know, I also think it's nice to have a more organic conversation between 2 or more people talking about a subject. And I think sometimes, even though it can kind of get a little off the rails and go in a direction unexpectedly, but I think that's kind of good too. And I think that's one of the neat things about human conversation. You just kind of don't know where it's going to go. So hopefully in the future I can do more of these if this comes out right. And well, thank you again for watching, and stay safe, play great games, and I'll see you real soon.